Hola! Today, you're going to complete la segunda parte, or the second part of the notes about el presente del subjuntivo, donde y cuando lo usamos. Lo siento. This is going to be in páginas 6 a 9 de tu paquete, okay? And you're going to get some information about the basics as to what's going to trigger us to use the present subjunctive. Make sure that you give yourselves good information. First off, with the most basic rules at the top of página 6, you're going to note that la oración va a tener dos cláusulas, two clauses, and that you're going to see la palabra que without an accent, which means that, entre or between these two clauses. Aside from the fact that you're going to see two clauses with the word que between them, the most important thing that you need to remember is that las cláusulas van a tener sujetos diferentes. In order to use a subjunctive, the clauses have to have different subjects. And when we see this type of setup, the subjunctive is always going to be in the second clause of the sentence. In other words, the clause that is after the word que. So if you look on página 6, you see a few examples that are going to show you just a little bit as to how and when this might be used. So we start with, yo recomiendo que ustedes practiquen mucho. Yo recomiendo, I recommend, in the present indicative or regular present tense. You have the word que, and then the second subject, ustedes, followed by the verb in the subjunctive, practiquen mucho. This translates to, I recommend that you all practice a lot. The second example you have here is los estudiantes piden que la clase juegue matamoscas. Your first subject is los estudiantes, followed by piden in the present indicative, the word que, then your second subject, la clase, and your second verb in the subjunctive, juegue matamoscas. La traducción, your translation, the students ask that the class play matamoscas. And your final initial example here, just so hopefully you can start to see a little bit the difference between subjects and note that separating word. Es dudoso que nosotros no tengamos tarea hoy. Your first subject is it, as indicated by es, which means in this case it is. Dudoso, it is doubtful. Word que for that. Your second subject is nosotros. Silly Comcast. And then our second verb, which is in the presente del subjuntivo, tengamos tarea hoy. So it's doubtful that we don't have homework today. The biggest thing you need to do to remember these rules is to remember, sorry, don't need to be there just yet, weirdo, which is our mnemonic device. This is a very basic list of certain verbs and expressions that will trigger the use of the subjunctive in the second clause. So if we see one of these verbs, a verb on any of these lists in the first clause of a sentence, and you see the word que in between, in the middle, and a second clause with a different subject, you're going to use the subjunctive in that second clause. So the W or W stands for wants and wishes. The A stands for emotions. E for impersonal expressions. R for recommendations. D for doubts. And ojalá, completely separate word that we've discussed very briefly. Whatever. Go upstairs. Sorry about that for the interruption. So what you need to know first is what verbs in the first clause would trigger the subjunctive. So we start off with W, wants and wishes, and I would strongly advise that if needed, you write down the meanings of any verbs at the bottom of página 6, any verbs you don't remember well. What you need to know is that if you see one of these verbs in the first clause of a sentence, and the second clause is a different subject, you need to use the subjunctive in the second clause. You've querer to want, necessitar to need, preferir to prefer, exigir to demand, esperar to wait for or to hope, and pedir to ask for or to order. Make sure once again that you get down the meaning of any of these verbs you don't know well in your notes. If you take a look at the top of página 7, I'm going to do traducción A, and you should try traducción B on your own. La traducción A is los estudiantes esperan que la señora no tenga más apuntes para ellos. Los estudiantes, first subject, esperan, first verb, the students hope. The word que for that. La señora no tenga más apuntes para ellos. La señora is your second subject, and then tenga is your verb in the subjunctive, and your translation is the students hope that señora does not have more notes for them. Give be a try, and when you're ready, move on to the A for emotions. If you see any of these verbs, a lot of which are a little wonky, I'm going to point at the ones that conjugate like gustar, and you'll note them also noted in your note in the notes packet on página 7. And you have two clauses in the sentence. The clauses have two different subjects and are separated by the word que. You need to use the subjunctive in the second clause. So we have gustar, which technically means to be pleasing, but that we use to mean to like. Encantar, which means to love a thing or a place. Molestar, to bother or annoy. Enfadar, which is to infuriate. Agradecer, to appreciate. Interesar, to interest. And estar plus an emotion, so estar triste, estar feliz, etc., etc. Be aware, that means to be happy, sad. Be aware that gustar, encantar, molestar, enfadar, and interesar are all a bit wonky. They're verbs that conjugate like gustar. Once again, I'm going to work through the first example with you, and then you should try be on your own. So for A, we have ¿Estás tú feliz que la clase hable de los derechos humanos? Are you happy that the class talks about human rights? So we have ¿Estás as your first verb in the present indicative. Tú is your first subject. Of course, that goes after the verb because you've got a question here. Feliz, are you happy? Separating word que for that. La clase is your second subject, and then hable, your second verb in the present subjunctive, de los derechos humanos. So are you happy that the class talks about human rights? Once you're set with be, move on to impersonal expressions. Now it says here at the top, and you need to know the meaning of these verbs of the slide. Really, you need to know the meaning of these expressions. So once again, anything you're not certain about, make sure you write down. Es bueno que, it's good that. Es malo que, it's bad that. Es importante que, it's important that. Es dudoso que, it's doubtful that. Es extraño or raro que, it's strange that. Es posible que, it's possible that. Es necesario que, it's necessary that. Es imposible que, it's impossible that. Es una lástima que, it's a pity that. Es mejor que, it's better that. Es lógico que, it's logical that. And es increíble que, it's incredible that. At the top of página 8, I'll go through the first one, the first example A, and then you should try ejemplo B. So for ejemplo A, we have es increíble que los dictadores violen tantos derechos humanos. First subject is it for es, once again meaning it is. Increíble, separating word que. Second subject, los dictadores, and second verb in the present subjunctive, violen. The translation of the sentence is, it's incredible that the dictators violate so many human rights. Once you're set with be, move on to recommendations. We have the R for recommendations, and same thing. If you see one of these verbs in the first clause, and there's a change in subject between the first and second clauses, you need to use the subjunctive in the second clause. Recomendar, to recommend. Sugerir, to suggest. Insistir en, to insist or to insist on. Proponer, to propose. Requerir, there's an E to IE stem change there, to require. Prohibir, to prohibit. Permitir, to permit. We'll go through ejemplo A, and you'll do ejemplo B on your own again. Los estudiantes recomiendan que nosotros no escribamos más apuntes hoy. First subject, los estudiantes. First verb in the present indicative, recomiendan. Separating word for que. Second subject, nosotros, and second verb in the present subjunctive, escribamos. So the students recommend that we don't write more notes today. Once you're done with be, you're going to move on to dudas. If you see one of these verbs, once again, first clause, or one of these expressions in the first clause, and once again, change in subject, you're going to use the present subjunctive in the second clause. So make sure you know the meaning of these verbs and or expressions. Dudar, to doubt. No estar convencido or convencida de, to not be convinced that. Puede ser, it could be. no es verdad or no es cierto, it's not true. No creer, to not believe. No pensar, ida ahí stem change, to not think. And no estar seguro de, to not be sure. Ejemplo A, at the bottom of página 8, we have dudo que todas las personas reciban buen tratamiento. Your first subject there is implied in the verb. It's yo, because you have dudo, which is the yo form of the verb dudar. So I doubt, separating word que. So to the second clause, todas las personas, everyone or all the people. And then your second verb in the present subjunctive, reciban. So I doubt that everyone, or I doubt that all people, receive good treatment. Once you're set with ejemplo B, we're going to run very quickly to ojalá. And ojalá we went over briefly in class last week. It means I really, really hope, and it actually comes from the Arabic praise Allah, because southern Spain, as we know, is very close to northern Africa, and the Spanish language is in some areas especially very strongly influenced by Arabic due to the influence of North African culture on Spain for several hundred years, long time ago. So ojalá you can translate as I really, 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 really hope. What it really kind of means is like I beg to God or I pray to God. So what I'm going to do is let you try the ejemplo for numero 9 on your own. See what you come up with. And once you are all set, please have me check over your work and you can move on to the next activity. Gracias.